today we're going to go through 10 budget decks that you can make and do pretty well with if you're a new player, or even if you're just a budget player and you've been playing for a while and you're a bit short on rare cards or wild cards, because these decks use up to, I think it was 10 rares I put into these decks, because you can get rares from opening packs that you get for free to start with. You can get some rare wild cards to start with. So these decks use some rares, but I'm also going to give you some other rare upgrade options for the decks if you want to make them maybe a little bit more effective than they are as at the moment. But these can do pretty well. I've got wins with all of these decks as they are. So we're going to go through the decks. I'll explain the general strategy of the deck, the important cards that make it work, and like I said, some upgrade options as well. So if you find this useful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can get more content like this. Right, let's get started. And we're going to kick things off with the most obvious, the most common one, because if you only ever make one budget deck, this is the one you'll need, because this is pretty popular, pretty effective. This is mono red, and we have here lots of small, hasty creatures that can go wide, push through some damage, and have a few combat tricks. So the most important things we have are Monastery Swift Spear that has prowess, so it gets +1/+1 for each non-creature spell we cast. We've got Phoenix Chick because it's flying, it's got the evasion of flying, and it's haste as well, and it can come back from the graveyard. We've got some burn spells like Play with Fire, Lightning Strike. We've got some combat tricks or exile card draw effects like Blazing Crescendo. We've got Reckless Impulse to draw some extra cards. We've got Stolen Vitality for the surprise trample. When you're attacking with a really big Swift Spear and they block it with a 1/1, we can get a surprise trample on there. We've got Felden, where the opponent doesn't want to block him, because if they do, we get to exile more cards from the top of our library and play them up until the end of next turn. And we have Squee as the top end of this very cheap deck, which is only 3 mana, but if they don't get to kill it straight away, it starts making extra 1/1 goblins, so we go wider and wider. This deck only has 20 lands, because we don't need more than 20 when we have everything is like 1 or 2. You might even be able to go a little bit cheaper, or a little bit less than 20 lands, possibly. Try it out with less if you want, but it's getting kind of risky if you go less than 20. So the only rares we have here are 2 copies of Felden and 2 copies of Squee. Everything else is a common or uncommon. And that's what we have for budget red. All you got to do is keep getting your creatures out there and boosting them. They get +1 counters from Kamanu faces Carcassonne. You can throw a surprise Mirren Bane Splitter on something for an extra +2 damage. Works really well with the Phoenix Chick. And you just want to remove your opponent's creatures or anything that's going to be a blocker, anything that's going to be trouble, and get around them, use your combat tricks, draw extra cards. And yeah, that's mono red. It's pretty simple, but it's fun to play. And it makes very quick games, because if you don't win in the first 4 or 5 turns, you're probably not going to win. So the sideboard for this mono red deck, some other rare or mythic cards you might want to add. Some cards that actually aren't rare or mythic, but just other ones you might want to swap in. We've got Bloodthirsty Adversary, 2/2 haste. When it comes out, you can pay some extra mana to get an extra +1 counter on it and get an instant or sorcery from your graveyard and play that for free. Although you're paying 3 mana for the ability to play it for free, so you're still paying something. But you can get an extra Lightning Strike or something, or a Blazing Crescendo from the graveyard, which can work pretty well. We've got Volcanic Spite as an alternative removal spell. Like, you might want to swap out Strangle, because it's sorcery, for Volcanic Spite, which is an instant. But it can also put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library and draw a new one, which is a bit like a blood token. You get to basically get rid of something and get something new. If you have too many lands or not enough lands, that's really useful. If you're going really wide, Mechanized Warfare is great, because every single red or artifact source we have will deal an extra damage to the opponent. So if we have lots of 1/1 goblins or a few Phoenix Chicks, they're basically doubling their damage, which is really useful. We might want to deal with the opponent's shield reds or other big creatures that have 5 toughness. So Nahiri's Warcrafting is one way to do 5 damage to something, and if it does excess damage, then we get to look at extra cards and possibly play them this turn. So you want to do that before you do your land drop, in case you get to draw a land. which is good, but I actually like Rebel Salvo maybe a little bit better. It's a 3 mana instant 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Nahiri's Warcrafting is sorcery, and the instants are actually pretty useful in a prowess deck like this, or this kind of combat trick deck. With Rebel Salvo, you also get affinity for equipment, so it's 1 mana cheaper for each equipment you control. And with Mirren Banesplitter, which works really well in this deck, you get that even cheaper as well. So Rebel Salvo, pretty nice removal spell for big creatures like Shield Reds and Haughty Djinns and all those things. And we've also got a Thundering Raiju, which used to be more popular, seemed to disappear for a while, and started coming back again. It's a haste creature, puts +1 counters on things, does extra damage before it even hits the opponent. So that's a really good topper at 4 mana. And then for lands, you might want to include a copy of Sekenzen, which can make 2 1/1 colorless creature spirit tokens with haste. So an extra 2 damage. Potentially getting through, which is great if you need to go wide to get around your opponent. And Mishra's Foundry, which is a land which taps for colorless, which is the one disadvantage of the land, and why you might not want it, but you can potentially turn into a 2/2 attacker as well, which actually is good for blocking, but also for attacking if the opponent forgets it's there, or you just need to go wider. So those are the things we can add to the mono red deck, but as it is in this current budget version with only 4 rares, I've got some wins with this deck, so it's pretty good. Try it out if you haven't already. There we go. There's mono red. Let's go on to the next one. The next budget deck we have here is our mono black murder deck. So basically, it's as much removal as you can fit into the deck, with a couple of top end things to finish off the opponent. We've gone for the full 10 rares or mythics in this deck, so it's kind of an expensive budget deck, but these are cards I imagine you're going to get quite a lot of use out of, because Sheoldred, the Apocalypse, goes into pretty much any black deck, to be honest. And we have Graveyard Trespasser as another rare, which is really good, really versatile. And then we have Phyrexian Fleshgorger, which can be used in a few different decks as well. So they're pretty versatile rare cards that we have in the deck. In general, the rest of what we have are Cut Down, Go for the Throat, Infernal Grasp, Sheoldred's Edict. They're all removal spells. And Life of Toshiro Umezawa can be used as removal or just some life gain, and then a creature after a few turns. We have Morbid Opportunist. If you get this out and then you just kill anything the opponent has, you're going to keep drawing extra cards. So you're going to be really ahead on cards compared to the opponent. And if they want to kill your Graveyard Trespasser, they've got to discard a card to do it. So it's one way to keep making the opponent sacrifice their cards, you're getting new cards. So basically you get that card advantage. Graveyard Trespasser is also really good at managing the graveyard, getting rid of things your opponent might want to reanimate. So we've got Sheoldred the Apocalypse to basically drain the opponent. If we just keep it out there, it's going to keep draining, keep controlling the opponent's things with your murder spells. And Phyrexian Fleshgorger, which is a 7 mana creature, but can be a 3 mana creature if you cast it at its prototype cost. So it's very flexible in that sense. And it has Ward, pay life equal to its power, which is really good at getting your opponent to drain out as well, because if they want to kill this, they're going to have to pay some life. We've got Invasion of Eldraine as a one of discard effect. So your opponent might have to start getting rid of, they've had to get rid of some things to kill Graveyard Trespasser. If we can get them to remove some more cards from their hand, if they don't have more than one card in their hand, they can't get rid of Graveyard Trespasser unless it's like a Depopulate or Sunfall or some other sweeper effect like that. So we basically just want to drain your opponent for life, get ahead of them on cards, and then we have Corrupt as the finisher for this deck, which is only an uncommon, and it does damage to any target equal to the number of swamps you control, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt. So with Toshiro Umezawa and Fleshgorger, which has lifelink, and Sheoldred and Graveyard Trespasser, we have lots of ways to gain life and lots of ways to drain the opponent for life. So at the end, when they're not expecting it, we have 6 swamps out. We can do 6 damage to their face and gain some life to keep us going, and maybe we can do it a second time as well. We have 4 copies in here, so there's a good chance you're going to draw at least 1, maybe 2 in most games to finish off the opponent. I've got 25 lands in the deck, so a little bit higher than the average 24, because we want to make sure we get as many swamps out as possible to cast Corrupt for 6, and if we have Flesh Gorger still around or in our hand, we can cast it for 7, and if it's a 7/5 creature and the opponent has less than 7 life, they can't kill it, they can't target it, because it would kill them to do it. So it's basically kill your opponent's creatures, drain them for life, and finish them off with Corrupt. We have some sideboard cards here, which are potential things you might want to throw in, although to be honest, this deck works pretty well as it is. But we have Evolved Sleeper as a good early threat, so that it can keep growing, it can draw you extra cards itself, and people don't normally want to block it because it could become a Death Touch creature, so it's nice to keep that out as a threat. We've got Liliana to make the opponent discard a card. You have to discard one too, but if you're drawing cards with Morbid Opportunist, then it doesn't really matter so much. You're still going to be ahead of them on cards, and we can also use it to sacrifice something the opponent has, so it's a good way to keep them under control. Phyrexian Arena helps you draw extra cards each turn. You lose life for doing it, but we have other ways of gaining life, and if you have a Shieldred out at the time, you lose 1 life and gain 2 every time you draw. So it's actually gaining us extra life by having Phyrexian Arena out if we have Shieldred. You might want to have some kind of sweeper effects. This one happens to be rare. In fact, Path of Peril is one I might sometimes include as well, but it's not here on the sideboard. But we have Gix's Command, which can give us lifelink, destroy all the small creatures, although in this deck you have to remember we do have some small creatures. We have Morbid Opportunist, and Life of Toshiro Umezawa will come in as a, is it 2/3? Yes, 2/3. So like we don't want to use Gix's Command on those things if they're going to die, unless it's going to work out better for us. If the opponent's got everything, there's power 2 or less maybe. But we can return some things from our graveyard, and we can make the opponent sacrifice their biggest thing, which might be an Atraxa or a Tali or something crazy like that. Then we've got Cruelty of Gix, which is a great way of, again, removing something from the opponent's hand, so putting them behind on card advantage. We can then search for something, put that into our hand at the expense of some life, which we can probably afford, and then put anything from the graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. Now, if the opponent has a big reanimated target, that works really well. But if you have a Flesh Gorger that you've played for 3 mana that's died, bringing that back with Cruelty of Gix is good fun. It comes back as the big version. And then we've got Takenuma, the rare land for black, which can mill some cards and return something from your graveyard to your hand. You might want to include that because normally these cards, having at least one of them, there's not really any drawback. The only potential drawback in this deck is that Corrupt works on the number of swamps we control, and Takenuma is not a swamp, so we're going to make Corrupt 1 life point less effective in draining the opponent and gaining our life. So you never know, if you come down to like 1 life, it might make a difference. But like I said, as it is, we've got 10 rares or mythics in the deck. This works really well at getting rid of loads of little things your opponent has, getting ahead on cards, and finishing them off with a surprise Corrupt. People don't expect it much these days, so it's kind of fun to get that through. But there you go, there's Mono Black, and let's go on to the next one. So the next budget deck we have is the Izzet Spells budget deck, where we're basically going to go as wide as possible and then boost all of our creatures, hit the opponent as hard as we can by casting these spells over and over again. So the rares we have in the deck, rares or mythics we've got Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, so all of our instants and sorceries in the graveyard can be cast again with flashback. And we have, in fact, is that the only rare? I thought we had more rares in this deck. No, we don't. So we only have 2 mythics, which are Lear. The other ones that make a difference, I thought Balmor might be a rare because it's legendary, but it's not. So we can give all of our other creatures +1 and trample till end of turn for casting an instant or sorcery, with Third Path Iconoclast. Casting those non-creature spells are going to make lots and lots of 1/1 creatures, so we go really wide and give them all +1 and trample with Balmor Battle Mage. It's going to make a big difference. We've got Festival Crasher, which can add +2 to its power every time you cast instant or sorcery. So if we're casting lots of little ones like Consider, Fading Hope, Play with Fire, we're going to make this creature really big, and it's going to get trample from Balmor as well. Everything else is looking for cards, Impulse. We could also put Moment of Truth in here, because Moment of Truth looks at the top 3 cards of our library and puts one of them into the graveyard as well, which means with Lear out on the battlefield, putting something else in your graveyard is basically drawing an extra card. We've got Consider, Fading Hope, Play with Fire, just to get rid of the opponent's things, do that final damage, move blockers out of the way, look for other cards, and get things in the graveyard. And we've got Lightning Strike, again, possibly to finish off the opponent or to kill their creatures. We've got a Preening Champion here, which doesn't see a huge amount of play outside of Limited, but it was really good in Limited. Having a 2-2 and a 1-1, the 2-2 with flying, and it's only common, means that being able to cast spells with Balmor Battlemage out, it means we're going to basically be getting +1 and trample on both of these things. Flying's a bit harder to hit, so it's an extra nice creature to put in there. You could possibly take this out and replace it with some other Impulse, Moment of Truth, Volcanic Spite, those kind of things. But then you're relying basically on just Third Path, Iconoclast, and Festival Crasher to be your main damage engines for the deck. So it's nice to have some extra things that make additional creatures. Then we've got Stoke the Flames, which is a Convoke spell that does 4 damage to any target. Having all these extra soldiers from the Third Path Iconoclast, or the 2 creatures you get from Preening Champion, mean you can use them to convoke Stoke the Flames, although you need at least 2 red in order to do that. And the Elemental from Preening Champion is red. Iconoclast is red, but the soldiers are colourless, and Preening Champion is blue, so getting the right coloured creatures out to be able to convoke is one thing you have to keep in mind, but doing an extra 4 damage to the opponent's face or to any creature they have when they're not expecting it, considering Convoke can pretty much be cast for free, then it's going to be a pretty good surprise for the opponent. So yeah, a couple of Leers to basically cast all those spells again once they've gone to the graveyard, and you can do the damage that way. We've got, so islands, mountains, we've got the 2 colour lands for blue and red. These are the common ones that gain you 1 life, but obviously you have the other Pain lands and other lands. In fact, we've got them in the sideboard. Yeah, we have. Okay, so for the lands, like I was saying, Stormcarved Coast enters if you control 2 or more other lands. It enters untapped. But if it's the first 2, in the first 2 lands you play out, it enters tapped. So it's good, obviously, later on. Shivan Reef is good because it can be any colour, but it does 1 damage to you, so there's a little bit of pain for that reward. And you've got Sekenzen and we've got Otawara. Sekenzen makes the 2 1/1 creatures, which are colourless but can be used for Convoke, and obviously an extra 2 1/1s is good when you have Balmor Battlemage. And then we've got Otawara to basically return something of the opponent's, an artifact, creature, or enchantment, or planeswalker, to move it out the way. And the other things we might want to add to the deck are Mechanized Warfare, which can make all of our red or artifact sources do extra damage. Now, with the exception of Preening Champion, all of our creatures are red or artifacts, well, apart from Leer, but Leer's not there to make the damage. So basically everything we have does extra damage, which is really good, and our red spells are damage spells as well. So Play with Fire does 3 damage, Lightning Strike will do 4, so having Mechanized Warfare is good. Plus, it's a non-creature spell, so it triggers Third Path Iconoclast. Not Festival Crasher, because that's instant or sorcery, and so is Balmor Battlemage, but Third Path Iconoclast is just non-creature spells, so that would trigger there. And if you want to really go big, instead of using Mechanized Warfare, go with City on Fire, because then all of your things will do triple damage to the opponent, which means a Stoke the Flames does 12 damage to their face, which is nice, but it costs 8 to get out. You can convoke it, so if we get lots of soldiers out and a couple of red mana or red creatures, we can get City on Fire out, possibly by surprise, hit them with their Stoke the Flames. It's not a bad way to finish off the opponent doing 12 damage to their face. So there you go. There's the budget Izzet Spells deck. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Try it out. It's pretty fun. Only 2 mythics, so I think this might be officially the cheapest of the budget decks that we have today. We'll see if we find one that's cheaper. I don't think there is one. Okay, so on to the next one. Our next budget deck is Selesnya Counters, which relies almost entirely on Botanical Brawler, or at least that's the star card in the deck. It's the one that it's pretty much built around. Whenever we add counters, +1/+1 counters, onto something else, then you also add +1 counters onto Botanical Brawler. If you have a few of them out, then they're helping each other out. They'll start gaining counters really quickly. they get big, they've got trample, and they can finish off the opponent. So everything else in the deck is there to add counters onto something or benefit from counters being added, pretty much. So we can get all this damage through with an aggro style. So we've got Enduring Bond Warden, which can put a counter on itself or something else. That when it dies, puts the counters on something else. So we're moving these counters around. We've got Homestead Courage, which puts counters on things and has flashback, so you can cast it twice pretty much. Iron Apprentice works similar to Enduring Bond Warden. You put counters on it. You can put counters on something else when it dies. We've got Gaia's Gift to put counters on things, give it reach, trample, hexproof, and indestructible. With Ozolith, which is one of our rares in the deck, we can add more +1 counters onto things whenever counters are added. So if you put out an Enduring Bond Warden, it might put 2 counters on itself. When it dies, it would then put 4 counters on something else. Oh no, it's +1. It will put 3 counters onto something else. So it basically starts scaling up, which is similar to what happens with Quirion Beastcaller. Comes out with no +1 counters to start with, but whenever you cast a creature spell, it gets a +1 counter. And when it dies, you can distribute them wherever you want. So actually, if Beastcaller had 3 +1 counters on it, and you have an Ozolith out, and you have 3 other creatures, you can put 1 +1 counter on each of those 3 creatures, and they'll each get 2. So you basically double up on your counters. And then when you have Botanical Brawlers out, they're adding more counters all over the place. Everything starts boosting like crazy. We've got Kami of Whispered Hopes, which is only an uncommon, which does the same thing as Ozolith in putting additional counters on things when any are added. So these start snowballing and just building up each other, and you just get counters all over the place. And it can also add X mana of any particular color when X is its power. Starts as a 1/1, but if you put counters onto this, you can tap it for more mana. We've got Bloated Contaminator as another rare in the deck, which can do damage to the opponent, has trample, which is great with the +1 counters, but it also proliferates. So whenever we do that damage, we add counters onto everything again. We have Storm the Seed Core to distribute 4 +1/+1 counters on things, giving them Vigilance and Trample till the end of turn, if we don't have Trample already. And then we have Wandering Emperor, which is good as removal, but also, if we're attacking and the opponent's decided on their blockers, we play Wandering Emperor, flash it out, add a +1 counter onto something else, give it first strike, and then if we have any Botanical Brawlers out, they'll start adding counters on. If we have a Kami or an Ozolith, then a Wandering Emperor will do 2 +1 counters on the first strike creature it creates, and then we'll get all kinds of things happening with Botanical Brawler as well. So, counters everywhere. And then we've got Tyvar's Stand for some protection, or an extra boost in damage with our trample creatures, trying to push through those final points of damage to the opponent. Because we've got 2 colours in the deck, we've got the plains, we've got the forest, and we've got the 2 different types of 2-colour lands. They aren't the best. Like Botanical Plaza is okay, because you can sacrifice it to draw a card, but it's kind of expensive for doing that. But we need to have both colours because we want white and green early on. We want both for Botanical Brawler. So we kind of need both of those. So for the sideboard for this deck, we've got other things that basically add counters onto things and benefit from adding counters. So Invasion of Moag. When it enters, you put a +1 counter on each creature you control. If you have a few and there are brawlers involved and there are Kamis or Ozoliths involved, it's going to be a lot. We don't have to flip this. It's just a way of getting counters everywhere. But if you do, at the beginning of your end step, you get to put +1 counters on creatures as well. We've got Boonbringer Valkyrie, which is a great creature in itself, but can add +1 counters onto other things with its backup ability or itself. So again, triggers all the +1 synergies. We've got Gala Greeters that can add +1 counters on itself as well, but also create treasure and gain life. Augur of Autumn, which doesn't add counters. This is the one creature that doesn't actually affect the counter synergy, but we can play cards from the top of our library. And if we have creatures with at least 3 different powers, then we can cast creature spells from the top of our library as well. And when you're adding counters onto things, you can pretty much control the fact that you'll have 3 different creatures with different levels of power. So Augur of Autumn works really well. It's basically just getting all these extra creatures out. And then we have Doomskull Warrior again, which is a backup 1, so it adds +1 counters. It has trample in itself, and whenever it does combat damage, you get to look at more cards from the top of your library, reveal creatures or lands, and put them into your hand. So basically, just getting more card advantage as well. And then we've got the lands with white and green. We've got the Kamigawa rare lands. We've got the pain lands. We've got the slow lands that come out tapped after the second one, and then we've got the fast lands which come out tapped after the first two. So farmland has to be land number 3 or later to not be tapped, and Razor Verge Thicket needs to be lands 1 or 2 or 3. After that, it comes in tapped. So it's good to have a bit of variety. If you have those lands, put them in instead of these ones. If you don't, you might want to craft them because these lands are going to be really useful in lots of different decks. So yes, that's the green and white counters deck. It's very fast, it's very fun. Try it out, let me know what you think in the comments. The next deck we have is the budget red artifacts deck. So a bit like the other mono red deck, but with an artifact theme. The most important card here is Patchwork Automaton, a 2-mana 1/1 with Ward 2, but whenever you cast an artifact spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So Patchwork Automaton is going to keep growing as long as we're casting our artifact spells. We have as many artifact spells as we can in the deck. We have Lizard Blades, which is our only rare in the deck, which gives something double strike. Has double strike itself, but comes out as a 1/1. But you can increase its power, or you can reconfigure it to equip it to something else and give that double strike. So maybe you want to give your Patchwork Automaton double strike because it's hard to deal with and it's going to keep getting stronger. But if you have a really big, a powerful creature with double strike, what it really needs is trample. So we have Hex Gold Halberd, which is a Formiridan equipment card. It creates a 2/2 rebel at the same time. So as long as it's your turn, your creature that this is equipped to has first strike and trample. So maybe we could get a Patchwork Automaton with double strike, trample, ward 2, lots of counters on it. That's going to work really well. To trigger the artifact spell ability of Patchwork Automaton, we have Reinforced Ronin, an artifact that we can cast every turn if we want to. Rabbit Battery, another artifact creature. Got Play with Fire for removal, Mirror and Banesplitter for a surprise, which is also an artifact, and Experimental Synthesizer, an artifact that can help us get a bit of card advantage by drawing or exiling a card from the top of our library, and basically we can play that turn, and we can also sacrifice it to create an extra 2/2 creature, so not bad for 1 mana. And then we've got Atraxa's Skitterfang as another way of giving our creature some kind of evasion. So we can give our creature flying. If you want to give Patchwork Automaton flying, it's going to get over the opponent, hopefully, if they haven't got other flying things to block it or reach creatures. But we can also give something Vigilance, Death Touch, or Lifelink. So if we have a really big creature, giving it Lifelink is going to help us stay ahead. And Rebel Salvo, like we had in the other red deck, because we have affinity for equipment. So with this, we're going to be casting it for 1 mana most of the time because we have Hex Gold Halberd, we have Mirror and Banesplitter, and Rabbit, Battery, and Lizard Blades are all equipment. So Rebel Salvo is almost guaranteed to be a 1 mana, 5 damage to creatures or planeswalkers, and it gets around indestructible, which is really great because there's some things out there that are indestructible these days, and we can get rid of those as well. So we've got 22 lands in the deck. You might be able to go a little bit lower with it, but it's topping out at 3, but we have a few different 3 mana things we might want to cast. We have to spend some mana to reconfigure things, so having 22 lands is probably enough in the deck. In the sideboard, we have a few other artifact cards that can help with this. These synergies. We've got Phyrexian Dragon Engine, a 2/2 double strike that can come back again from the graveyard and can draw us extra cards when it does that. We have Urabrosk's Forge, which can create extra creatures every turn with trample and haste, and they sacrifice themselves, but they get bigger every turn. So Urabrosk's Forge, if you can defend against your opponent and you have a Forge ticking away, making a bigger creature each turn, that's not a bad situation to be in. You've also got things like Sword of Forge and Frontier that can give one of your creatures +2/+2 and protection from red and green. And whenever it does combat damage to a player, you can exile the top 2 of your library and play those this turn. And you can play an additional land this turn, which helps you really ramp up really quickly. So yeah, there's no great equipment you can add onto something, and it's really cheap to equip. It's only 2 mana as well. We've got Skitterbeam Battalion as another artifact creature that can go wide. It works well as 5 mana, which is kind of expensive for this deck, but probably just about doable. And if we happen to have 9 mana, if the game's gone on long enough, we have lots of lands out, we can create 3 4/4 creatures with trample and haste. So it's going to take the opponent by surprise, plus everything else we might have out at the time. Blade Coil Serpent works well in black and blue decks as well, but if we have it in just a red deck and we're paying the normal 6 mana to get it out, then it's going to come out as an 8/4 trample haste, which is going to take your opponent by surprise as well. We don't necessarily want to have these cards if we're using Experimental Synthesizer, because whenever we exile something, we want to be able to play it that turn, so we want smaller things. But if it goes bigger, these are the kind of things you might want to have. We've got Sekenzen, again, the rare land in red. Mishra's Foundry, the artifact land. It does not an artifact when you cast it, so it doesn't trigger the other things, but it can become an artifact creature which works along with the other synergies, and it's just a good one to have in lots of decks. And then we have Mechanized Warfare, again, because we have red and artifact sources doing damage. So this is kind of similar to the other mono-red deck, but the other mono-red deck is more prowess and burn spells, and this obviously is artifacts and that kind of synergy and strategy as well. So there's the budget red artifact deck. If you want something a little bit different to the other mono-red deck, try this one out and let me know what you think. So the next budget deck we have is the mono white humans deck, which works mostly on the benefit of having Copper Coat Vanguard in the deck. 2 mana 2/2 that gives other humans +1/+0 and ward 1. And if we have 4 of these out on the battlefield, all our other humans get +4 and ward 4, which is crazy. So what rares do we have in the deck? We have Adeline Resplendent Cathar, which is a human that makes other humans, which is really useful. We've got Brutal Cathar, which is a human, which is also removal, so we get to exile one of the opponent's things. And if we are able to flip it to nighttime and flip it back to daytime, then it gets to exile a second thing as well, which is great. Then we've got Intrepid Adversary, which is a mythic. It's a 3/1 lifelink. When it comes out, you can pay an extra 2 mana any number of times you want to put a Valor counter on Intrepid Adversary, and all of our other creatures get +1/+1 for each Valor counter. So playing this, if you play it for 4 mana, everything else gets +1/+1. If you play it for 6 mana, everything else gets +2/+2. So it's a really good spell, especially to do near the end when you have lots of creatures out and want to give them all a big boost. The other rare we have here is Hopeful Initiate, a 1/2 creature with training. When you attack, it adds +1 counters onto itself, and then you have the ability of removing 2 +1 counters from among any creatures you control. So if you happen to have them somewhere else, which you can do with Homestead Courage and Illuminator Virtuoso, getting +1 counters on them, then you can destroy artifacts and enchantments, which you might find you come up against every so often. So it's nice to have that as an option. In general, the rest of the deck is just humans. We've got First Strike, we've got Ward 1, we've got removal, we have Recruitment Officer to potentially look at more cards on top of our library and draw other creature cards with mana value 3 or less, and we don't go up past 3, so basically anything in our deck, any creature in our deck can be drawn with Recruitment Officer. We've got Ambitious Farmhand to make sure we hit our land drops, but can also transform into a 3/3. I know it says here can't transform because that's a problem with the card styles on Arena at the moment, but trust me, the ability at the bottom of the card, Coven, 3 mana, transform it into basically a 3/3 lifelink creature. With Virtuoso, we want to be able to target it with things so that it can connive, and we can target it with Homestead Courage, so we can basically get that to connive. But also, even if we don't get to do that, it's a 2 mana 1/1 double strike that can get boosted with Copper Coat Vanguard. It can get boosted with Intrepid Adversary, so it's a nice creature to have as a blocker and extra damage. And we've got Resolute Reinforcements, which flashes in to make extra creatures, and Cut Short, which is a good surprise to have to be able to remove something of the opponent's that's a Planeswalker that was activated or a tapped creature, because it has Convoke, and you're probably going to have some creatures that haven't tapped, and you can probably use this as a surprise. We have Adeline, which has Vigilance, which doesn't tap when it attacks anyway, so cut short your opponent might not be expecting, but it's a good way to get rid of something that Lay Down Arms might not be able to reach. So there's a good number of other things you might want to add to this deck, which are really good human creatures that would work out pretty well. We have Guardian of New Benalia, which can enlist, so it can take the power from something else, do extra damage, it can scry, and it can become indestructible. We've got Thalia, which we are not using in the deck at the moment. We have Chaplain of Arms as a 1/1 first striker, which can get boosted with Coppercoat Vanguard, so it's kind of a replacement for Thalia, but if we want to have Thalia, which will make non-creature spells cost more, then we probably don't want Cut Short or Lay Down Arms, although they're kind of cheap, so maybe we do. You might want to have more Brutal Cathars if you have Thalia to act as your removal, so it would make the deck more expensive in that way. We've got Anointed Peacekeeper, which is another human with Vigilance, which is something that can basically take something from the opponent's hand, make it 2 mana more to cast, or if it's a Planeswalker, it costs 2 mana to activate its abilities, which is a nice thing to do to Planeswalkers. It's normally the magnet for removal. As soon as you put out Anointed Peacekeeper, it gets killed, especially if you don't target the opponent's removal as the thing that costs more to cast. So basically, whenever you play this out, you're going to check out the removal from your opponent's hand and make it more expensive. And we've got Lauren of the Third Path to destroy artifacts or enchantments and draw extra cards. The Wandering Emperor is a good mythic card that can work really well in this deck. Although if you have Thalia, then you're going to make the Wandering Emperor more expensive. And the samurais it makes are not human samurais, they're just samurais. So it's good removal in general, but maybe doesn't work with the humans thing quite as much. We've got Knight Errant of Eos, which is a human as well, can convoke. It's a really good card that could basically get extra creatures from the top of your library, which is great guard advantage. So it's a really good card to have. And then we have the White Kamigawa land, which is great for using as a combat trick to do 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. So this is the budget humans deck. There's lots of things you could do to make this better by adding in these other rares and mythics and taking out maybe Virtuoso. You might want to take out Homestead Courage, Lay Down Arms, Cut Short, and just go in with loads of Thalias and use Brutal Cathars for your removal. Chaplain of Arms is good, especially when it transforms or disturbs and comes back as the other creature that gives everything Ward 1, especially when Coppercoat Vanguard does that as well. So it's a really good aggro deck. It's small, it's fast, it gets wide, and it gets big with Adeline, in particular when you have lots of creatures. So try this one out and let me know what you think. We're going to change pace now and head over to black and blue with this Dimir Toxic control deck, where the idea is to get a poison counter on your opponent and then proliferate as many times as possible to kill them with the poison counters before they can do enough damage to you. So we have creatures with Toxic, Death Touch, so the opponent doesn't want to block them. We have flying creatures with Toxic that come back when you proliferate. Another fly with Toxic. We have Blight Belly Rat, which has Toxic, and when it dies it proliferates. And we can put poison counters on the opponent with things like Prologue to Phyresis as well. So lots of things also proliferate. So Experimental Augury proliferates, Drown and Ichor proliferates, Blight Belly Rat, when it dies, proliferates. And also, Vraska's Fall also puts a poison counter on the opponent and makes them sacrifice something. So if they have one big creature out, you can get to sacrifice that. That's good news as well. The other things in the deck benefit from the opponent having corrupted or having 3 poison counters on them already. We have Bring the Ending, which is basically a make disappear, but if it gets better if the opponent has the 3 or more poison counters, because it can just counter anything for 2 mana. So get those 3 poison counters on there quickly, and then you have a really good counter spell. It doesn't add to your win condition, it just slows the opponent down. So we've only got 2 of those in the deck here. We also have Anoint with Affliction to exile smaller creatures that have mana value 3 or less, or bigger creatures if the opponent has those 3 poison counters. So that works really well as well. And we have Distorted Curiosity, which can draw 2 cards for 3 mana, or just for 1 mana if the opponent is corrupted. And then our mythic card in the deck, our only rare or mythic card at the moment, is Vraska Betrayal's Sting, because we can use the 0 ability to draw a card, lose 1 life, and proliferate, which adds counters. So although it's 0, it's actually a +1 because it adds a counter onto Vraska. We can remove the opponent's troublesome creatures, turn them into treasure artifacts with the -2, and if we happen to get up to 9 loyalty on Vraska, we can make sure the opponent has 9 poison counters, and then we can do anything to proliferate and they would be dead. Although if you get to the ability, if you get to the point of Vraska getting to, have 9 loyalty, you probably would have killed them other ways as well. So you probably don't actually get to use that too often. You probably just finish them off with the 0 ability on Vraska. But don't forget, if you have Vraska out, then any other proliferate things will add loyalty counters onto Vraska, so that helps her get better as well. Obviously, we've got a 2-color deck, so we have islands and swamps, and we have the other 2-color lands here that add life and can be sacrificed to draw cards. And then in the sideboard, we don't have too many things to add to this strategy, because these are the best things, the cheapest, best things that will proliferate and add poison counters. But you might want to have Liliana for extra card disadvantage on your opponent and to get rid of creatures that your opponent has. We have the rare lands, Otawara and Takenuma, and then we have the 2-color rare lands, which is Darkslick Shores, Shipwreck Marsh, and Underground River. The fast land, the slow land, the pain land. Because with this, it's very important that we get both the colors, because we want to make sure we have things to remove, things to counter, things to draw extra cards. The Voidwing Hybrid needs both colors to be able to cast. And then when we proliferate, it comes back to a hand, we have to cast it again. So we need to have both colors as early as possible. So more 2-color lands, the better in this deck. It's probably, to be honest, one of the least effective of these budget decks, I think. I haven't really studied the win rate of them in detail. It can be difficult to play against this deck, because no matter how many blockers the opponent has, you can always get those extra poison counters through with things like Prologue to Pheresis, or flying toxic creatures, or proliferating. So even if the opponent has a really solid defense, you can get around it. So against some decks, this works really, really well. But in general, I don't know if it's going to be as fast as mono red attacking you if you're using this. Maybe. It depends, right? You counter things, you can exile things, you can kill things. There's lots of different ways to get rid of things. So maybe you can with the Dimir Toxic control. If you're not sure, obviously you can try it out. You try it without Vraska. In fact, you can try this as an artisan deck, right? You don't need Vraska. You can do everything here. Maybe have a couple more Anoint with Affliction or Bring the Ending, and then just try it this way. Use these lands, see what you think. But if you want to make it a bit better, Vraska, the other lands, they're going to help you do a few more things in your games compared to what we have here with the basic 2-color lands. Okay, well, that's Dimir Toxic control. Let's go on to the next one. Moving on from the black and blue toxic deck, we have here a white and green toxic deck that relies mostly on, or works really well with, Venerated Rock Priest. It's a rare. It can do the poison counters itself by attacking, but also we can give the opponent poison counters by just targeting our creatures with spells, or if the opponent targets our creatures with spells. So it's a really good way of getting those extra poison counters on the opponent, especially if you have more than one Venerated Rock Priest out at a time. Apart from that, we have Crawling Chorus, which can do the toxic damage itself, but replaces itself with a might when it dies. We have Duelist of Deep Faith, toxic and first strike when it's attacking. Jawbone Duelist, toxic and double strike when it attacks. It has toxic 1, but it's going to hit the opponent twice because of double strike, so it's effectively toxic 2. We've got Branch Blight Stalker, toxic 2, 3/1 creature. Slaughter Singer, which works really well here because it's not only toxic to itself, but other toxic creatures that attack get +1/+1 till end of turn for every Slaughter Singer out, which really boosts up your Jawbone Duelist and your Duelist of Deep Faith. So they aren't as easy to block, much harder to deal with when they're attacking in. We've got Annex Sentry as a Brutal Cathar style removal, although this is only uncommon, which is nice. Also has Toxic, and it's also an artifact, which means it gets around the opponent having something like Go for the Throat because they can't kill it. It does still die to cut down, but then so does Brutal Cathar anyway. And having 4 toughness makes it better to block with and harder for your opponent to remove with things like Play with Fire or Lightning Strike. So in a way, it's a little bit more resilient than Brutal Cathar. And then we have Bloated Contaminator, because we can proliferate when we do extra damage to the opponent, and proliferating is something that is going to scare your opponents to death when they already have poison counters on them. And there's not much they can do when you have Rock Priests out and their poison counters are racking up, and they can try and kill it, they can target it, but it is at their own risk. And if they do, you might even be able to protect it or target it with your own thing. So we have Tyvar's Stand for protection to target Rock Priest, or Contaminator to put extra power and toughness onto it, which might help it do its trample damage and finish the opponent off. But we also have Aerial Boost and Complete Devotion as a couple of common cards that can target our own creatures and are easy to cast. With Aerial Boost, we have Convoke, so we can give something +2/+2 and flying, which is a good way of getting maybe a Jawbone Duelist over the opponent's creatures and doing a couple of extra toxic damage to them, or working on the Bloated Contaminator could do the same thing. And then we have Complete Devotion, giving a creature +2/+2 till end of turn and drawing a card if it has Toxic, which again is a way of protecting something. Like if they target it with a Play with Fire, you can give it +2/+2. You might want to add that onto a Jawbone Duelist or a Bloated Contaminator or anything else. So we basically want to get some poison counters on the opponent, keep attacking as much as possible, get around their defenders, go as wide as you can, and protect your creatures when they try to remove them, and that will put the last poison counters on your opponent. We've got our normal land-based mana base here, and then in the sideboard there's a few other things that you might want to add that are going to help make this deck even better. And to be honest, most of them are lands, because the lands are really useful here. But we have Skrelv, Defectomite. It has Toxic in itself, and you can tap it to make another creature we control hexproof and from a certain colour, and it can't be blocked by creatures of a colour, and it gives it Toxic 1. So if it already has, if we're using a Jawbone Duelist, goes from Toxic 1, hitting twice, it does 2 poison counters, to maybe Toxic 2, Double Strike, can't be blocked. Now that puts 4 counters onto something. Skrelv's ability doesn't trigger Venerated Rock Priest, because Venerated Rock Priest has to be the target of a spell and not the target of an ability. So unfortunately, that doesn't trigger Rock Priest. If it did, it'd probably get banned, because that would be crazy. But you can protect things anyway with Skrelv. We've got Skrelv's Hive, which can make extra 1/1 might creatures with Toxic, and if the opponent has 3 poison counters on them and we have Corrupted, then all of our creatures with Toxic have lifelink. So that's basically everything. So we're going to end up with lots of life gain if we have a Skrelv's Hive out. We have the white rare lands, the green rare lands, the pain lands, the slow lands, the fast lands. But we also have in this deck Mirrex, which is, to be honest, can be added in almost any deck, because it taps for colourless mana, but it can be mana of a particular colour if it's the first turn it's entered. So it can work pretty well in decks like this when we still have 2 colours and lots of small creatures to come out. But we can spend 3 mana to create an extra might, normally on the opponent's like end step, just to get another creature out to go a bit wider. And then we've also got Seed Core, which can just tap for colourless by itself, but can also be used as any colour to cast Phyrexian creature spells, which is the majority of our deck here. And we can give a 1/1 creature of ours +2/+1 till end of turn if the opponent has 3 or more poison counters, which might work really well on a Jawbone Duelist. Or what else do we have? Any 1/1 creature, so Crawling Chorus or the mites that it produces would do that as well. So this is probably better than the other Toxic deck, the black and blue one. There might be some other things you want to take out, like Duelist of Deep Faith and Complete Devotion, Aerial Boost. These are extra things that might be able to push through a little bit more toxic damage, but you might want to have maybe some other protection spells or more Bloated Contaminators, whatever you think you might need for the deck. Might work out pretty well having those things as well. Okay, well that's the green and white budget Toxic deck. Let's go on to the next one. The next budget deck is probably one of my favorites and is definitely one of the cheapest with the fewest upgrade options, which means it's going to stay cheap for quite a while. This is the budget blue Haughty Djinn deck, where Haughty Djinn is the only rare card we need in the deck because it's a flying 4 toughness creature where its power is equal to the number of instants and sorcery cards in our graveyard, and instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast. So we want to have loads of instants and sorceries, loads of ways of putting things into our graveyard, and all of these 2 mana spells are basically 1 mana spells. So we have loads and loads of cheap things when we have Haughty Djinn out. And the only other creatures we have in the deck are Tolarian Terrors, which are 7 mana creatures that are 5/5s that have Ward 2, but they cost 1 less for each instant and sorcery card in our graveyard. So after a first 4 turns, possibly 5 turns, we're probably going to be able to cast these for 1 mana each. So a 1 mana 5/5 Ward 2 creature is pretty crazy. It's a good blocker, but it also can just go through and attack if needed. So it's the only other creature we need. You could have like Delver of Secrets and Ledger Shredder and other cards like that in the deck, but to be honest, I don't think you really need it. So yeah, we want to put things in our graveyard. Consider can surveil 1, put something in the graveyard, then it goes in itself. So that's 2 things in the graveyard for 1 mana. We've got Curate, which surveils 2. So it's basically Consider, but slightly better. And if we have a Haughty Djinn out, it only costs 1 mana, so it's just a basic upgrade on Consider. We have some counter spells, Essence Scatter for creatures, Make Disappear for general things. We have Negate for the non-creature spells. And Moment of Truth is one of the newer additions to the card. It's from March of the Machine, so it's not really new. But we can look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of those into our hand, 1 to the graveyard, 1 to the bottom of the library. So it's a bit like Impulse, but Impulse looks at the top 4, and you only put 1 of them into your hand. With this, we're looking at top 3, put 1 into our hand and 1 into the graveyard. So there's a slight benefit for this deck, putting extra things into our graveyards, because we want to make the Haughty Djinns as strong as possible. And then we have Thirst for Discovery to draw 3 more cards and get rid of any extra lands we have, because we only need to have like 4 or 5 lands, to be honest, to make this deck work really, really well. We have Flow of Knowledge to draw lots of cards. When we're running out of things, we get one of these and it can basically refill our hand because we're drawing for every island we control, which by this point is going to be at least 4, most likely. It is 5 mana to cast it, but if you have a Haughty Djinn out, it costs 1 less. So 4 or 5 cards at least we're drawing. We could be drawing 8 cards and discarding 2, and the 2 we're discarding are probably the extra lands we don't need as well. So it basically refills your hand with lots of cheap things we can cast. So that's the basic idea of the mono blue Haughty Djinn deck. It works really well. You don't want to get Haughty Djinn out on turn 3 when you have 3 lands. You want to get it out later because it's going to be more powerful later on. And you also want to have some kind of protection, whether that's a Slip Out the Back, a Fading Hope, the counter spells, whatever it might be. You want to make sure that Haughty Djinn doesn't get killed. So you want to make sure you have some kind of protection when you play it. So, in general, that's the deck. In the sideboard, we don't have very much to add to this. It works really well as it is. You might want to add the Kamigawa rare land to this, but to be honest, if we do, then Flow of Knowledge would draw 1 fewer card because it's not an island, and Thirst for Discovery can't discard it as the basic land. So, is it useful to have effectively a 4 mana kind of Fading Hope? I don't know. I don't think it really is, so I don't tend to include it when I use this deck. The only other thing you might want to have is March of Swirling Mist, because you can use this as protection to make your Haughty Djinn or Tolarian Terrors phase out, especially if your opponent is going to use some kind of sweeper, but it can also be used to phase out all of your opponent's blockers if you just need to get a Haughty Djinn through. It's not unusual for Haughty Djinn to be doing 10 or 15 damage with all these cards in your graveyard. So being able to just remove the blockers is a good way of winning with the blue deck. It's probably one of my favorite ones that I use out of these budget decks. I literally don't add anything else to this one. It's only 4 rares. That's all you need. So if you haven't tried it, try it. Let me know what you think. It's the play pattern is slightly different to maybe other things like mono red aggro where you just throw everything out. This one you want to be a little bit slower and more careful and drag the game out as long as possible. So it's a slightly different play pattern to these aggro decks, but it is a really fun one to do. So let me know what you think of that one. And our final budget deck for the day is the green and white enchantment deck. That's basically powered by things like Jukai Naturalist, Kami of Transience, Generous Visitor, but more recently we've had Calyx Guided by Fate added in as well. So we've got Calyx there, which is our mythic. We've got Kami of Transience, which is our rare. And we've also got Invasion of Theros, which is a one of included in this deck, which is a rare that can look for an aura, god, or demigod card, reveal it, put it into a hand, and shuffle. We don't have any gods or demigods in the deck, although I kind of feel like Calyx should be. No, maybe not. But we want to search for an aura, and the auras might be Audacity, which can give our creatures +2 trample and draw a card when it goes back to the graveyard, or Ossification, which is our main removal for the deck. So Invasion of Theros can find one of those two, whether we need extra damage going through or to remove something of the opponent's. So that's really useful just to search something up. And if we can hit it for 4, which isn't too much, it can basically turn into an indestructible lifelink enchantment. And whenever another enchantment enters the battlefield, we draw a card. So it's really, really good. But we don't want to get loads of these, so that's why I've only got one of them in the deck. Maybe you could have 2 if you wanted to, but it is one of the rares, so it depends on your budget. So in general, with this deck, we want to get out a Generous Visitor, Kami of Transience, Jukai Naturalist, and just play as many enchantments as we can. We have Commune with Spirits to find enchantments or lands if we need them. And we have Seal from Existence to remove anything that isn't a creature or planeswalker, because Ossification only does creatures and planeswalkers. And it's hard to get rid of. With Invoke Despair, it's easier because it makes us sacrifice it. But without Invoke Despair out there, having Ward 3 on this Borrowed Time style card means it's going to be really hard for the opponent to remove it. And then with Calyx, when we do damage with enchanted creatures or Calyx, then we get to copy a non-legendary enchantment we control. So we can copy a Seal from Existence or an Ossification, or we can copy, another Jukai Naturalist, or whatever we need to copy, maybe another Audacity. So, or a Spirited Companion, so we can draw extra cards. There's basically loads of things we can copy here. And Calyx is going to make us go really wide. So this enchantment deck worked well before Calyx. With Calyx, it's back in there. It does a really, really good job. And then when we have Trample, whether it's Kami of Transience or Audacity, we can add +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment we control, or artifacts we control, for the first 2 turns. So we can put lots and lots of +1 power onto something of ours with Trample. So that can get the final damage through, or if we need to, we can put it on our life linker and make sure we stay in the battle a bit longer by gaining loads of life in one turn. Again, with the lands, we have our plains, we have our forest, we have our 2 color lands, and then in the sideboard, we have the lands again like we did before. It's the same thing, but we have a few other rares or other cards that might work really well in this deck. Rite of Harmony. Whenever a creature or enchantment enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card. This works really well if we have lots of things entering the battlefield, like a Reign of Truth transforming, cheap things like Spirited Companions coming out and Audacities coming out. So we can potentially draw lots of cards that way. We've got Catilda, Dawnheart Martyr, which is a good enough creature in itself, flying, lifelink, protection from vampires, power and toughness equal to the number of permanents we control that are spirits and or enchantments, and with Generous Visitor and Kami of Transience being spirits and everything else being an enchantment, then Catilda is going to be really big, but when it dies, we can pay 5 mana, or whenever we throw it into the graveyard, we can pay 5 mana to put it on to a creature of ours, give it +X/+X instead of what its power and toughness would be. So it basically boosts another creature. Really good on something with Trample. Restoration of Iganjo can help us find a basic plains, which is important when you have Ossification, to be honest, because you need a basic land to be able to cast Ossification. It can put something in a graveyard, like a Catilda, maybe, or bring back a Spirited Companion, or a Jukai Naturalist, or an Ossification. can bring back lots of things with it, with its second turn ability, and then it can become a creature that is an enchantment. It's still an enchantment, but it can also make 1/1 colorless spirit creatures as well, and spirits work well with Catilda and obviously just going wide anyway. So Restoration of Aganjo is a really good card to include there. We've got Takasha's Welcome. If you want to draw more cards, then have one of these out on the battlefield, and every one of your creatures that enters, because they're all mana value 3 or less, they will draw a card. That happens every turn, so that's really useful. We've got Hallowed Haunting, which is mythic, but if you include that in this deck, then you're going to be creating spirits every time you cast enchantments, and they're going to get bigger if you have more and more of them. So Hallowed Haunting, if it's not taken care of, if it's let to grow and grow, it's going to do huge things for you and make loads and loads of creatures. But also, if you have 7 or more enchantments, where Hallowed Haunting is one, and obviously like we have loads of creatures that are enchantments as well, then they all get flying and vigilance. So you're going to basically get over the top of your opponent, no matter how many blockers they have. Giving everything flying and vigilance is going to make a big difference. And then we've also got Weaver of Harmony, which is a rare. Gives other enchantment creatures +1/+1, and it can copy the activated or triggered ability of an enchantment source. So we have all kinds of things that will activate and target things like Ossification, Reign of Truth, and everything else. So Weaver of Harmony can copy that just for 1 forest, 1 green mana. So it's a really good one to include. It makes everything else bigger as well, but we haven't got it in the basic version of the deck. But if you want to add it in, it's there in the sideboard section. So that's the last one of these 10 budget decks. Let me know what you think about this one, and we are going to wrap up. So there you have it. There's the 10 budget decks that you might want to try out. They have all kinds of different strategies. So whether you like a more control-y deck or an aggro deck, if you want to go wide, if you want to go big, there's lots of different things that you can do here. So let me know what you think of them. Let me know what your favorite one is. Let me know if you think any of them are absolute rubbish. I would love to know which one the worst one you think is. Let me know in the comments below about that as well. And if you found this video helpful at all, then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos like this one, or giving you any other information on how to get the most out of Magic Arena. There's all kinds of things on the channel already, so don't forget to check those out. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching this video to the end. I will see you in the next one.